The bell signaled the start of the day at Saintwood High School, a modern high school located in the heart of the small town of Crestfall. Despite being a relatively new building, its gray-toned walls and cold white-lit hallways gave it an impersonal, clinical air that led many students to describe it as alive as a government office. It was a day like any other, filled with chatter, backpacks scraping the floor, and teachers attempting to maintain order with a mix of exhaustion and resignation. Amidst the chaos, Adam, a 17-year-old student, walked with his head lowered through the main hallway. He wore a gray hoodie and worn-out jeans, the unofficial uniform of those who preferred to stay unnoticed. Around him, groups of students seemed oblivious to his presence, except for one figure approaching from the other end of the corridor.
Adam! Where have you been?
Ethan exclaimed, his voice cutting through the noise as he clapped Adam on the shoulder with an easy grin. Ethan was everything Adam was not: tall, with unkempt hair that looked intentional, and always full of energy.
I wasn't lost, just running late.
Adam replied, trying to mask his exhaustion with a forced smile.
Adam! Where have you been?
Adam shrugged. He didn't want to talk about the way he had spent the night listening to the sounds of his father's shouting echoing through the walls of their home, nor about the times he had pretended to be asleep as empty bottles smashed against the floor.
I'm fine, just tired.
He lied, shifting his gaze toward the throng of students filling the hallway. Changing the subject had always been his go-to strategy.
By the way, have you seen what's for lunch? I hope it isn't that weird stew again.
Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical but choosing to let it slide.
Don't worry. If it's poisonous, I'll be the first to try it for you. That's what friends are for.
Both of them laughed, though Adam's smile was brief and never reached his eyes. As they walked toward the classroom, Claire and Nathan joined them, two more members of their small social circle. Claire was a small, dark-haired girl with her hair tied in a high ponytail, known for being the voice of reason among the group. Nathan, on the other hand, was quieter, his serious gaze rarely softening, but always loyal to his friends.
You're late again, Adam, humph.
Claire said, her voice carrying a mix of reproach and concern.
Are you staying up late to study or something?
Or something.
Adam murmured, avoiding eye contact. Before anyone could push further, Nathan spoke up.
The literature teacher isn't here today. We have a free period.
Perfect. Anyone up for the cafeteria? I'm sure I can convince Mrs. Agnes to give me an extra pastry.
As the group made their way toward the cafeteria, Adam couldn't shake the feeling that he was just a passive observer in his own life. His friends talked and laughed, their words seeming distant, as though they were coming from the other side of a pane of glass. From time to time, his thoughts drifted back home, where he knew his father would be drinking, sinking deeper into his cycle of self-destruction. But here, in the hallways of Saintwood High, Adam clung to the illusion of normalcy. Even if only for a few hours, he needed to believe his life was like that of any other student. However, something at the back of his mind whispered to him that this fragile facade wouldn't last much longer. The days drifted by at Saintwood High like a serene river on the surface, but with dark currents swirling beneath its calm exterior. Adam grew more reserved with each passing day, and though Ethan, Claire, and Nathan tried to reach out, the wall Adam had built between them felt increasingly impenetrable. One morning, as everyone gathered in the cafeteria, Claire set her tray down with a soft thud on the table and crossed her arms, observing Adam.
Adam, can you be honest for a moment? What's going on? I'm not blind, something's wrong.
Adam looked up, surprised by the sudden seriousness in his friend's voice. He tried to formulate a convincing response, but his mind went blank. Every word he considered felt like either a blatant lie or a truth he couldn't share.
It's nothing, really. I've just been tired.
Claire didn't look satisfied with that answer, but before she could press further, Ethan interjected.
Come on, Claire. Give him a break. Maybe he just needs some time to sort things out, he said in a light-hearted tone, trying to ease the tension.
Adam shot him a grateful look, though he knew Ethan suspected there was something deeper behind his behavior. Nathan, as always, remained silent, his unreadable expression fixed on the scene. The conversation shifted to another topic, but the air at the table lingered with unease. Adam barely touched his food, and as soon as he could excuse himself, he left for the bathroom. He needed a few moments alone to gather himself. In the bathroom, Adam leaned against the sink, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His face was pale, with pronounced dark circles under his eyes and an expression he barely recognized. His hand trembled as he ran it through his hair, taking a deep breath to calm his nerves. A sound behind him made him spin around sharply. The bathroom door had closed on its own, or so he thought. There was no one else there, but the faint creak of the hinges sounded loud and sharp in the empty room, like a cry. Adam tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination, another symptom of the stress that seemed to weigh on him daily. When he looked back at the mirror, for just a brief moment, he thought he saw something behind him. A fleeting shadow, like a vague, blurred figure. He spun back around, but there was nothing there. His heart was pounding, and sweat began to bead on his forehead.
I'm losing my mind.
He murmured to himself, quickly leaving the bathroom without looking back. The days that followed grew worse. Adam's absences from class became more frequent, and when he did attend, he barely spoke to anyone. His friends noticed his erratic behavior, he muttered to himself, appeared distracted, and offered short, evasive responses. Even during the most mundane activities, such as lunchtime or casual conversation, Adam seemed to be somewhere else. One afternoon, as they walked home together, Ethan decided to confront him directly.
Adam, I don't know how to say this without sounding dramatic, but we're worried about you. You know I'm not great with words, but you don't have to carry whatever it is you're going through on your own. We're here for you.
Adam stopped walking and looked at him for a moment, as if considering his words. But instead of responding, he simply nodded and continued walking.
Thanks, Ethan.
He said quietly, but the conversation felt closed. Ethan understood that he wouldn't get much more from his friend, but the nagging sensation that something serious was happening lingered in his chest like an uncomfortable weight. Meanwhile, at home, Adam's situation was deteriorating rapidly. His father, Marcus, appeared angrier than ever. The nights were filled with shouting and unsettling noises that reverberated through the walls of their small home. Adam did everything he could to avoid confrontation, locking himself in his room and using headphones to drown out the chaos, but isolation didn't bring the peace he so desperately sought. One night, while attempting to focus on his studies, a loud knock at his door startled him.
Adam! Get out of there, now!
Marcus's voice was hoarse, a mix of rage and desperation. Adam froze. There was no apparent reason for his father to be calling for him, but the threat in his tone was unmistakable.
I'm busy.
He replied in a thin voice, hoping that would calm his father. The response came with another knock, stronger this time. Adam clenched his fists, his anxiety mounting until, finally, the noise stopped. His father's heavy footsteps retreated down the hall. But the echo of that moment remained in Adam's room, feeding the constant fear that lingered in his own home. The next day, Adam didn't show up at Saintwood High. His friends exchanged worried glances as they noticed his absence.
This isn't normal anymore.
Claire said, breaking the silence as they stood in the hallway.
We have to do something.
We could go to his house after class.
Nathan suggested.
If he doesn't answer, at least we can make sure he's okay.
Ethan and Claire nodded, though there was an undercurrent of unease. Adam had grown increasingly unwilling to talk about his home life, but this time, it felt as though they had no choice. After class that same day, the three friends walked together toward Adam's house. The walk, though short, was filled with silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Adam's house appeared neglected, the paint was peeling, the front garden overgrown with weeds. Ethan knocked on the door, and the sound echoed through the air. They waited in silence, and then the door creaked open with a groan. Marcus stood in the doorway, his figure unsteady in his gaze dark. The smell of alcohol was strong.
What do you want?
He asked in a gruff, dismissive tone, looking at the three teens with disdain.
Good afternoon, sir. We're friends of Adam. We just wanted to know if he's okay. He hasn't been coming to school.
Claire explained, trying to stay composed. Marcus studied them in silence for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking.
Adam isn't here. He left days ago and hasn't come back. Now get out of here.
He said, slamming the door shut. The three friends looked at each other, confused and worried. Something was terribly wrong, but at that moment, they had no idea what it was. They walked back toward their homes with uneasy thoughts, none of them able to sleep that night. What none of them knew was that this would be the last day they would ever see Adam's house intact. The days passed, and Adam's absence became a mystery that cast a heavy, suffocating atmosphere over Saintwood High. Ethan, Claire, and Nathan tried every possible way to contact him, but his phone remained disconnected, and his social media accounts stayed eerily inactive. What had begun as simple concern grew into a deep, helpless sense of frustration. Finally, one morning, a local newspaper headline brought a chilling new dimension to the case. Young man missing, police investigate possible connections with father. Ethan read the article in the school cafeteria, his face pale as he tried to process the words. Marcus had been arrested after investigators uncovered unsettling evidence at his home. Neighbors had reported strange noises and erratic behavior from Marcus, which led the authorities to dig deeper.
This can't be real.
Claire whispered, taking the newspaper from Ethan to read the headline herself. Her voice shook as her eyes scanned the page, tears welling as she saw Adam's name mentioned between the lines. Nathan sat silently, his face stoic, but his fists clenched tightly under the table. Ethan broke the silence, his voice resolute.
We have to go, again. We need to know the truth.
Without another word, the three friends made a silent agreement. That very afternoon, they would return to Adam's neighborhood to uncover what they could. When they arrived, they found the house surrounded by yellow police tape. A patrol car was parked outside, and officers were moving back and forth, carrying boxes and documents. Claire approached one of the officers while Ethan and Nathan stayed back, watching from a distance. After a few tense minutes, Claire returned with a defeated look on her face.
They won't let us in.
She said, her voice breaking.
It doesn't matter. We can talk to the neighbors. They must know something.
Nathan said with grim determination. The three began speaking with the residents in the area, but the responses they received were hesitant, filled with vague fear. People were clearly uneasy about discussing Marcus or the events leading up to his arrest. Most residents avoided the topic, but hints of his volatile nature and strange occurrences in the house lingered just beneath the surface of their words. Finally, an older woman, her hands trembling as she clutched her coffee cup, gave them a crucial piece of information.
I saw that man loading something into his car a few nights ago, something wrapped in a sheet. It looked heavy,
she said, her voice a fragile whisper.
I called the police because it felt wrong, but I never imagined that it could have been anything like this.
Ethan felt his stomach twist in a sickening knot at her words. Claire's hand went to her mouth as though to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. Nathan looked away, his gaze fixed on the ground as if trying to block out the implications. The three stood there in silence, the weight of the woman's statement sinking in. The air felt colder somehow, and the shadows cast by the nearby trees seemed to stretch and twist in ways that set their nerves on edge. They had hoped for answers, but what they had found only raised more questions. What had Marcus loaded into his car? What dark secrets lay hidden behind the walls of his home? The three exchanged a glance, each of them knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey into the unknown. Days later, the news reported a grim discovery: a body had been found in a forest near the city. Authorities confirmed that it was Adam. The investigation revealed a harrowing story. Marcus, in a violent rage and under the influence of alcohol, had attacked his son after a heated argument. What began as a clash of angry words escalated into a tragic and irreversible end. The community was shaken to its core. At Saintwood High, students whispered about Adam's fate in hushed tones. Teachers observed a moment of silence in his memory, but the absence of his presence lingered far deeper than any symbolic gesture could express. For Ethan, Claire, and Nathan, the blow was devastating. They met one final time in the park where they had spent so many afternoons together. A place once alive with laughter, light-hearted conversations, and the sound of carefree footsteps now felt hollow and empty.
How could this happen?
Claire asked, breaking the heavy silence. Her voice trembled with anguish, her eyes glistening with tears. Ethan, unable to find an answer, simply shrugged. His shoulders carried the weight of helplessness. Nathan, his gaze lost on the horizon, finally spoke.
It isn't fair. But we can't forget this. We can't let this be just another tragedy that fades into silence.
The three remained still, each of them battling their own grief and questions. They understood that their lives would never return to the way they were before. The memory of Adam would remain with them, a scar that could never truly heal. That night, Ethan wrote in a notebook, one Adam had given him long ago, as if speaking to his friend directly.
We failed you, friend. But I promise we won't let your story end here. Rest in peace.
He closed the notebook and put it away, the words weighing heavily in his chest. It felt like both a prayer and a vow. A reminder of the fragile nature of life and the shadows that could lurk even in the most ordinary of places. The echoes of Adam's absence lingered in their hearts. And in those shadows, they resolved that his story would never be forgotten.